Israel to open 2 new aid crossings into Gaza following US warnings about growing humanitarian crisis.
For Europeans, Ukraine is the favorite country to join the EU, according to an exclusive Euronews poll by Ipsos. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told his Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba that Ukraine will become a part of NATO during the NATO summit in Brussels.
Israel has agreed to expand humanitarian support into Gaza, allowing aid to temporarily pass through Ashdod port as well as Erez crossing. The decision was announced after US President Joe Biden warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that US policy may shift if the growing humanitarian situation isn't addressed.
The president emphasized that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation in Gaza are unacceptable. He made clear the need for Israel to announce and to implement a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps.
7 international aid workers were killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza this week. International pressure is mounting over the country's handling of the war, with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk telling local press Israel should compensate aid workers' families. Netanyahu acknowledged the country's military carried out the unintended strike on innocent people, and officials were looking into the incident.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Ukraine will become part of NATO. During the NATO summit in Brussels, members of the alliance promised to continue to provide aid for Kyiv. Yet, the Secretary General of NATO reconfirmed the alliance does not consider itself directly involved in the war.
We don't have any plans of having any NATO combat troops inside Ukraine. There have been no requests for that. But the Ukrainians are asking for equipment, for ammunition, for weapons, and we are providing that to Ukraine. That doesn't make NATO allies party to the conflict, but we support Ukraine in upholding the right for self-defense.
More explosions were reported in Kharkiv. At least 4 people were killed, 3 of which were rescue service workers. Russian media reported that in the Russian-occupied part of Kherson region, 4 civilians were killed by Ukrainian strikes. For Europeans, Ukraine is a favorite candidate country to join the EU, beating much older contenders like Albania, Serbia, and Turkey. That's according to an exclusive Euronews poll by Ipsos. 45% of people support bringing Ukraine into the bloc, 20% say they are not sure, and 35% oppose. Runner-up is Bosnia and Herzegovina with 37% of support. The country with the least support among EU citizens is Turkey with 24%.
For so many years, enlargement was out of the agenda, so enlargement was not part of the topics that was prevailing in the EU's agenda, and it wasn't until the Russian aggression against Ukraine in February 2022 that enlargement gained momentum again. Enlargement was put on the table again. Leaders understood, and member states as well understood that enlargement was necessary in order to strengthen the union, and the narrative about enlargement also adopted a more positive approach.
Support for Ukrainian membership is highest in Finland, Portugal, and Spain. Sweden, Poland, Denmark, and Romania are also strongly in favor at over 50%. The least supporting Europeans are in Hungary, followed by Slovakia and Czech Republic. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, the strongest support comes from its neighbors, Romania and Bulgaria. Georgia's candidacy is supported by Romania and Spain. In general, Spain and Portugal are the countries that mostly support the enlargement, while residents in France and the Netherlands are mostly negative.
In the case of like France and Netherlands, for instance, this low support for enlargement can be explained by the fact that its governments have been traditionally critical towards enlargement and have been reluctant to enlarge. We saw it, for instance, in 2019 when the Netherlands and France blocked the opening of EU accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia, or recently it also happened with Bosnia, that the Netherlands was one of the most critical countries about taking such decisions.
Mainstream political powers back EU enlargement, though the extreme right, identity and democracy are against.
In Taiwan, efforts continue to rescue dozens of people trapped under the rubble after the worst earthquake in 25 years. At least 9 people were killed in Hualien County and more than 1,000 were injured. In the city of Hualien, near the epicenter, 48 residential buildings were damaged. About 690 people were either still missing or stranded on Thursday, including more than 600 who were stranded inside a hotel. Some 60 workers who had been unable to leave a quarry due to blocked and damaged roads were freed. The quake and its aftershocks caused landslides and damaged roads, bridges and tunnels, causing significant transport problems. The army is working on the cleanup. Here, soldiers are clearing debris in a Hualien school, the hardest hit city. Taiwanese Premier Chen Chien-jen has visited the evacuees, still shaken in the aftermath.
The French police removed dozens of migrants from the forecourt of Paris City Hall as the capital gets ready to begin its 100 days countdown of the start of the Olympic Games. About 50 people, mostly women and children aged 3 to 10, were relocated on a bus to a temporary government housing in eastern France.
C'est des familles, c'est des mineurs, c'est nos patients, c'est des gens avec qui on essaye d'être solidaires. Et là, au nom des Jeux Olympiques, tout ce qu'on leur propose, c'est de partir loin de Paris, à Besançon ou à Marseille.
Aid workers have expressed concern that the move is the beginning of a broader effort by Paris authorities to clear out migrants in the capital before the Games.
Donc ces propositions ne sont pas adaptées. Il y a des places à Paris, par contre ils font place nette pour les Jeux Olympiques. Donc en fait c'est ni plus ni moins du nettoyage social et de l'invisibilisation par la région.
Many of the families are from French-speaking African countries.
Ils ont dit on doit aller à la Provence, mais c'est mieux plus que pour rester à dehors avec les enfants. Comme ça, c'est pas vite, c'est fatigant quand même.
Olympic organizers have said they are working to find solutions. Aid groups have distributed food, blankets, and diapers and helped some of them find temporary housing for a night or two.
Hot and dry weather combined with strong winds has caused early wildfires in the Fogaras Mountains in Romania. Firefighters are navigating difficult terrain and struggling to prevent the fire from reaching homes and destroying the forest. In some areas, the problem is a lack of water. In Greece, firefighters and emergency services took part in a large-scale exercise this Thursday at a 12th century monastery located in a forest near Athens. The aim, to prepare for the fire season that starts in May. Temperatures in Greece reached 30 degrees Celsius in March, with large forest fires breaking out weeks earlier than expected. Democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights are core values of the European Union that have been shaken over recent years. In 2022, members of the European Parliament were accused of being involved in a cash for influence corruption scandal, which allegedly implicated Qatar, Morocco and Mauritania. Fast forward 15 months, the European Parliament filed a lawsuit against the European Commission over the release of frozen funds to Hungary, a country it claims failed to meet standards of judicial independence set out in the EU treaties.
I see a lot of complacency in the European political class, all across the political spectrum, from the right to the left, in which people running for elections say, well, the European citizens have probably forgotten about this. And I don't believe so. I think there is something very profound that has to be attached to the Qatargate and several other little or smaller scandals that have occurred since then, suggesting that there is a culture of impunity within the institutions.
As the European elections approach, the credibility of the European institutions has come under closer scrutiny. According to the latest Eurobarometer poll, the second biggest threat to democracy for people across the bloc is the growing distrust and scepticism towards democratic institutions. However, the destabilization of democratic processes by threats such as cyber attacks was the biggest concern for only 9% of respondents.
I would say they should live up to the values and standards that they ask of the 27 member states when it comes to rule of law, when it comes to integrity of public institutions, when it comes to ethics. And they haven't done so. There is an unfortunate double standard between the Commission and Parliament and the member states on the standards that they ask when it comes to these issues and the standards that they place on themselves. And until that discrepancy is balanced or addressed, then the credibility will continue to wane in the eyes of voters towards the institutions.